So we're going to talk about photosynthesis, which, as you can see, we all know as being the thing for plants. So coming into plants is CO2 along with water from below, H2O, which then ends up creating oxygen at the top. But the energy from the sun is what triggers it, and what do they finally get out of this? Sugar. Now, how does this relate to everything that we're going to be talking about? Well, here is the actual chemical photosynthesis. You have HCO2 plus H2O becomes that wonderful sugar. This also creates 6 extra oxygens. Now, those oxygens end up going into the atmosphere, which we then breathe, which is actually a pretty nice situation. Now, this is not the end. Where does photosynthesis get used again? Well, obviously, we all know that sugars from plants are what we use to feed ourselves. So what happens when we flip this around? Well, what you're going to see is cellular metabolism. We take that sugar and we bring it right over here to the beginning of metabolism. We eat the sugars and we breathe in oxygen. That oxygen is going to create carbon dioxide, a little bit of water, and energy. Now we know this energy to be heat. That's why our body heat is 98.6 degrees. Now what happens when we actually combust and use a fuel that is not sugar? Well, you can use something like this, which is basically like gasoline. In a perfect world, you get oxygen that's being taken plus nitrogen from the air. Once you combust it, you create carbon dioxide, water, and the nitrogen doesn't get used. But the reality is far more complex than that. You end up taking the fuel, combusting it using the oxygen. The nitrogen ends up being used in a whole different way. Once we add the ignition, we end up with carbon dioxide, water, nitrogen, and hydrogen, but you also end up with unburned hydrocarbons. Carbon monoxide, which we know is very deadly from a car, and oxides of nitrogen, which are known pollutants that are really dangerous. Now you may think that regulated emissions is like your car where you have to go get a smog check, but these regulated emissions also come from other places. As you can see, some of the hydrocarbon fuel can be oil, wood, coal, natural gas, and all of these combust, creating that carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, which is quite deadly, smoke and ash, which really gets people sick, nitrogen oxide and sulfur oxides, which are going to cause a lot of problems in the atmosphere when they get converted into acid rain later down the line. And that's pretty much it. Hopefully that helps you guys out with the idea of photosynthesis and the chemicals that come from that process, and from the process of combustion, which is, remember, effectively the reverse of photosynthesis.